Welcome to our channel. Today we uncover 10 historical events of great tragedy, often brushed aside in conventional education. Prepare yourself, for the journey ahead may be arduous, but it is a journey we must undertake to understand the world around us and to learn from the mistakes of our past.
Our journey begins in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. A young black man, Dick Rowland, is accused of assaulting a white woman. The incident sparks racial tension, leading a white mob to descend upon Greenwood, a thriving black community. Homes and businesses are looted and burned, the prosperous district reduced to smoldering rubble. Hundreds of black residents are murdered, their stories lost in the ashes. The Tulsa Race Massacre was erased from history books for decades. No trials were held, no perpetrators brought to justice. The legacy of the Tulsa Race Massacre lives on in the fight for racial equality and the pursuit of justice for past wrongs. It is a story that demands to be told and remembered, lest we repeat the mistakes of our past.
Our journey takes us to the winter of 1937. The Japanese Imperial Army captures Nanking, then the Chinese capital. What follows is 6 weeks of unimaginable horror. Men, women, and children are systematically murdered, often in the most barbaric ways imaginable. Historical accounts speak of mass executions, beheadings, and unspeakable acts of sexual violence. The exact number of victims remains a subject of debate, but historians estimate hundreds of thousands perished. The Nanking Massacre stands as a stark reminder of the importance of international cooperation and the rule of law in preventing such atrocities. It is a story that must be told, not to perpetuate hatred, but to honor the victims and to learn from the mistakes of the past.
Our journey continues to the highlands of Anatolia, in the heart of the Ottoman Empire. The year is 1915. World War I rages across Europe, and within the Ottoman Empire, suspicion and fear towards the Armenian minority reach fever pitch. Accused of siding with Russia, the Armenians are systematically rounded up and deported from their ancestral homelands. Families are torn apart, forced to march for hundreds of miles across desolate landscapes with little food or water. Thousands perish along the way, victims of starvation, disease, and the brutal treatment of their Ottoman captors. The Armenian genocide resulted in the deaths of an estimated 1.5 million Armenians. For decades, the Turkish government has denied the scale and intent of the Armenian genocide. However, the weight of historical evidence is undeniable. The world must never forget the suffering of the Armenian people, and we must remain vigilant against all forms of intolerance and discrimination.
Chapter 4: The Partition of India, a Nation Divided. Our somber journey takes us to the Indian subcontinent in 1947. After centuries of British rule, India is granted independence, but at a terrible cost. The country is partitioned along religious lines, creating the independent nations of India and Pakistan. What follows is one of the largest mass migrations in human history. Millions of Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, caught on the wrong side of the newly drawn borders, are forced to flee their homes. Violence erupts with terrifying speed. Neighbor turns against neighbor, fueled by religious hatred and fear. Massacres, riots, and unspeakable acts of violence become commonplace. The partition of India resulted in an estimated 15 million people displaced and between 200,000 and 2 million deaths. The wounds of partition still run deep in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. The event serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of religious extremism and the importance of peaceful coexistence.
Chapter 5: The Congo, Free State Atrocities, a Reign of Terror. Our journey now takes us to the Congo Free State, under the personal rule of King Leopold II of Belgium. It is the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Europe's thirst for rubber has transformed the Congo into a nightmare. Under Leopold's brutal regime, the Congolese people are subjected to unimaginable cruelty. Forced labor, torture, and mutilation are commonplace. The most chilling symbol of this brutality is the practice of hand chopping. Historians estimate that between 2 and 10 million Congolese lost their lives. The Congo Free State atrocities represent one of the darkest chapters in human history. It is a story that demands to be told and remembered so that such horrors are never repeated.
Chapter 6: The Holodomor, Death by Starvation. We journey now to the fertile plains of Soviet Ukraine in 1932 to 1933, a man-made famine, engineered by Joseph Stalin's regime, tightens its grip on the Ukrainian people. Driven by a ruthless policy of collectivization, Soviet authorities seized grain from Ukrainian farmers, leaving them with nothing to feed themselves or their families. Villages are blockaded, preventing any food from entering. Families are reduced to eating grass, tree bark, and even, in the most desperate cases, human flesh to survive. The Holodomor claimed the lives of an estimated 3.9 million Ukrainians. It is a chilling example of how a totalitarian regime can use famine as a weapon against its own people. The Holodomor remains a deeply sensitive and controversial topic. The Ukrainian people continue to grapple with the legacy of this tragedy, demanding recognition for the suffering inflicted upon them by the Soviet regime.
Chapter 7. The Cambodian Genocide Killing Fields of Angkar. Our journey now takes us to the killing fields of Cambodia in the late 1970s. The Khmer Rouge, a brutal communist regime led by Pol Pot, has seized control of the country. Their goal to create an agrarian utopia through forced social engineering. Cities are emptied and their inhabitants driven into the countryside to work on collective farms. Intellectuals, artists, religious leaders, and anyone deemed an enemy of the revolution are systematically eliminated. The Khmer Rouge's reign of terror is characterized by mass executions, torture, forced labor, and starvation. Over the course of 4 years, an estimated 2 million Cambodians are murdered by the Khmer Rouge. The Cambodian genocide left an indelible scar on the country. Even today, Cambodia struggles to come to terms with the legacy of the Khmer Rouge regime and to rebuild its shattered society.
We find ourselves now in Rwanda in 1994. For months, tensions have been simmering between the Hutu and Tutsi ethnic groups. The assassination of the Rwandan president, a Hutu, becomes the catalyst for mass violence. Hutu extremists, fueled by years of propaganda and ethnic hatred, unleash a wave of violence against the Tutsi minority. Armed with machetes and guns, they massacre their neighbors in their homes, churches, and schools. The international community, paralyzed by inaction and indifference, fails to intervene in any meaningful way. In just 100 days, an estimated 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus are slaughtered. The Rwandan genocide serves as a stark reminder of the importance of early intervention, the dangers of unchecked hate speech, and the need for international cooperation in preventing future atrocities.
Our journey takes us once again to China, this time during the late 1950s and early 1960s. Mao Zedong launches the Great Leap Forward, an ambitious but disastrous attempt to rapidly transform China into an industrial powerhouse. Millions of peasants are forced into communes and ordered to increase agricultural production. Traditional farming methods are abandoned in favor of untested techniques, leading to widespread crop failures. The Chinese government, unwilling to admit the failure of its policies, continues to procure grain from the countryside, leaving millions to starve. The Great Chinese Famine, a direct result of Mao's disastrous policies, claimed the lives of an estimated 30 to 45 million people. The Great Chinese Famine remains a sensitive topic in China, often omitted from history textbooks. It is a period that must be remembered and studied to understand the human cost of utopian experiments and the importance of accountable governance.
We conclude our journey in the United States, in the first half of the 19th century. The United States government enacts policies to remove Native American tribes from their ancestral homelands in the southeastern United States. The Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw nations are forcibly relocated west of the Mississippi River to designated Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma. Thousands of Native Americans are driven from their homes, forced to march hundreds of miles under armed guard. The conditions along the Trail of Tears are horrific. Exposure, disease, starvation, and exhaustion claim the lives of thousands, including men, women, and children. The Trail of Tears represents a dark chapter in American history, a shameful legacy of forced removal and cultural genocide. It is a story that must be told and remembered so that we may learn from the mistakes of the past and work towards a more just and equitable future.
Our journey through these dark chapters of history is now complete. We have confronted the horrors of genocide, famine, and ethnic cleansing. These stories, as painful as they are to recount, are not meant to fill us with despair, They are a call to action, a reminder that we must never forget the lessons of the past. If you found this video informative, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Together, let us keep the memory of these events alive so that history does not repeat itself.